It started with the kind of rain that doesn't just fall, it devours. The kind that eats at the silence, until every drop feels like it's pounding against your skull. I was driving through the northern woods of Oregon, trying to beat the storm before nightfall. The map said it was just a 2-hour drive to the cabin I'd rented, a weekend alone. My first break in months. The kind of solitude that was supposed to fix my head. But solitude has a strange way of revealing what really lives inside you. By the time I reached the forest road, the world outside was pitch black. My wipers couldn't keep up with the rain. It was coming down so hard I could barely see the dirt road ahead. Then, suddenly, a flash of lightning tore through the trees. For just a second, I saw it. A small figure standing by the side of the road. A person. I slammed the brakes. When the headlights flickered back on, the road was empty. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the storm, a reflection, a shadow, anything but what I thought I saw. I pressed the gas again and didn't stop until I reached the cabin. The place was small. Dark wood walls, single fireplace, one bedroom upstairs. Cozy, in theory. But something about it felt stale. Like the air had been waiting for me, holding its breath. There was a faint smell. Iron, maybe rust. I tried to shake it off, made some coffee, and unpacked my things. Outside, the rain never stopped. It drummed on the roof like restless fingers. By midnight, I started hearing something else. A tapping sound. Soft, uneven. At first I thought it was a branch against the glass, but when I checked the window, there were no trees close enough to touch it. The sound came again, this time from the back door. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. I froze. My phone had no service. The landline was dead. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and pointed it toward the door. Nothing. But when the next flash of lightning came, we met a solidly lit again, a shape standing just beyond the porch railing. It didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared. I couldn't make out a face, just the glint of something metallic in its hand. Primera ba, skidawai. My pulse hammered. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the figure turned and disappeared into the storm. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on the porch, small, barefoot ones, leading up to the door. They stopped at the threshold, like whoever it was had been standing there for hours, watching. I should have left then. I know that now. But the storm had flooded the road. I was trapped. By the second night, power went out. The world turned black, and the only sound left was the rain, and that same quiet tapping, coming from the attic this time. I climbed the stairs with shaking hands, my flashlight flickering with every step. At the top, there was a small wooden door built into the wall, half hidden behind old boxes. The tapping came again, from inside it. My breath caught. I crouched, pressing my ear against the wood, and then I heard it. Not tapping, not anymore. Whispering. My name. Lorraine found me first. They latched onto the windshield in sheets so thick they acted like curtains, pulled across the road every few seconds by a wind that howled through the gorge. The old Tulane dipped toward a lake none of my friends had heard of, and I hadn't seen since I was 12. There was a timber lodge out here back then, summer place. Fireworks on the dock, pancakes in a dining hall that smelled like coffee and pine. When life got loud this year after the layoff, after my father's stroke, I booked 3 nights at that same place on a discount site. Off-season special, the email said. Lakeside cabins. Quiet. Quiet. That was the word I clung to as the GPS lost signal, and the radio turned to static. It was close to midnight when the gravel appeared under my headlights, and the shape of the lodge slid out of the trees. 2 stories of dark wood, a roof pitched steep to shed snow, a covered porch sagging under the weight of water. The sign in the grass was New Wren Lake Lodge, but the place felt older than I remembered. Older and emptier. A bell hung by the office door. It gave a tired little ring when I tugged the rope. Nothing. I rang again, then pressed my forehead to the glass and cupped my hands to see inside. A counter, a pegboard of keys, several missing, a back door, propped with a rubber wedge. The lights were on but dim, like a dying aquarium. Someone moved in the hallway beyond, slow and heavy, and for a second I thought it was the sway of a plant. Then the door creaked, and a man filled the frame late 50s. Beard the color of wet bark, yellow slicker dripping onto the floor. "Bad night for a drive," he said, voice low from a chest that smoked too many winters. "You, Anders." "Yeah," I said, surprised he had the name ready. He slid a paper ledger across the counter. Signed the old-fashioned way, double if he's been cutting out with the weather. "Power could go. We've got the generator." But he shrugged. "Try not to run the baseboard heaters and the microwave together." His name tag said Cal. Mine shook on the page as I signed. The wood stove in the office popped once and then settled to a creaking quiet. "Cabin 7, he said, lifting a key from the pegboard. "Good solid one, closest to the shore." "How many cabins are booked?" I asked, making conversation I didn't feel. He paused. "Folks checked out this morning when the advisory went out." He set the key in my palm. His hand was cold as the brass. "It'll be you and me tonight. I bunk in the lodge. You need anything, Rhine to Bell. Landline's there, too, if the cell tower goes." He slid a laminated map across, a black and white aerial photo. The cabins made a horseshoe along the curve of the lake. 7 was at the bottom, closest to the waterline. I thanked him, forced a smile, and ran through knives of rain back to my car. The lane to 7 was a tunnel of firs whose lower branches had been stripped bare by wind. The cabin stood on blocks, a foot off the ground, its porch a slick ribbon where raindrops bounced and rolled toward the steps. Inside, a single room with pine paneling, a kitchenette, a small table, a braided rug that squished under my boots. A door on the right opened to a bathroom. At the far wall, a narrow staircase led to a sleeping loft with a low beam and a twin bed tucked under the roofline. A framed photograph by the door showed the lake in summer smooth as glass, canoe drifting. A kid about my age, when I last came here standing on the dock with a popsicle. I stood there dripping until the quiet got too loud. Then I drew the curtains, kicked the space heater on low, and boiled water for a mug of instant cocoa I didn't want. The rain had a taste to it through the screen metallic, like pennies. The kitchenette window rattled in the wind. Somewhere under the floor, something small scuttled and then went still. I told myself all the same lies you tell when you want to decide you're safe. That cabins make strange noises, that old wood shifts, that people like Cal exist because someone has to. It worked for 20 minutes. Then I noticed the ledger. It shouldn't have been there on my table, but the paper was unmistakable. Brown faux leather, swollen at the corners from years of damp. The same book Cal had made me sign. I hadn't brought it from the office, I was sure. Yet there it lay, a wet ring, imprinting the cover from the cocoa I'd just set down. I called the lodge office. The line rang into the dark and then disconnected with a chirp like a tired bird. "Okay," I said out loud, to whoever I was trying to convince. "You must have grabbed it. You're exhausted." The ledger opened with the exhausted sigh of paper. The names on the page were tight, neat, and not Cal's. Dates lined the left margin. A month's worth. I skimmed. September 18th, Nolan and Mara's cabin to storm schedule. Checkout AM, September 19th. Miller family cabin, 4 extra towels. Boys sick. September 20th. Dre, H cabin 7. Odd tapping reported. Sept 20. Dre, H cabin 7. Says Nay whispered downstairs, September 21st. Dre, H cabin 7. No signature on checkout. The cocoa cooled in my hand as if the words were pulling heat out of the room. A drop of rain slipped through a knot in the ceiling and fell onto the date September 21st, blurring the ink into a gray balloon. "Cal," I said, more to the empty cabin than the phone, and my voice sounded like someone else's, thinner, an older me. Outside, something thumped against the side of the cabin, maybe a loose branch, maybe the lid of the trash bin. I stepped to the window and lifted the blind with 2 fingers. The lake was a tangle of whiteness, where wind sheared rain into mist. The dock was a suggestion. At the far edge of my vision, A shape moved between the cabins upstream. A person in a rain poncho, gray against gray, walking slowly from porch to porch, head down. I watched them stop at cabin 5, disappear behind it, reappear near cabin 4. They never looked up. They never looked toward me. I told myself it had to be Cal making rounds, but he had on T-worn a poncho he. T-worn a yellow slicker on this figure never shone under the porch light the way a slicker should. Do wear it all the exact tone of the sky. I let the blind fall. The tapping began near the floor, faint as a moth. It crept along the baseboard to the wall beneath the ladder to the loft. It stopped. Started in 3 quick taps. 1 long. Stopped. I knelt. Put my ear to the paneling. Tried to ignore the way the cold crawled into my jeans. I could hear it then, without doubt. Not a mouse. Not pipes. The rhythm had intention. 3 taps. Pause. 1. 3. Pause. 1. A signal. I knocked back 3 with my knuckle without thinking, then felt ridiculous. An adult tapping at his own wall. The silence that followed was so alive, I could hear the patter of rain change on the roof when the wind shifted. Then from the other side of the wall, 3 taps, perfectly matched, and a scrape like the edge of a coin dragged along rough wood. I stood too fast and clipped my shoulder on the stair rail. The room tilted, righted. Nope, I said. Nope. Nope. I took the ledger and my keys and stepped out onto the porch into a world made of water. The rain flattened me in seconds. The porch boards flexed under my boots, and the lake breathed somewhere to my left. Black lungs, exhaling. The shape I'd seen between cabins was gone. The only movement was a tipped canoe bumping and bumping against a tree. The bell by the office felt a mile away, but I started for it anyway. Head down, key clenched so hard the teeth bit my palm. I didn't reach the lodge. A voice stopped me. Not a word, just the sound of 1 syllable. It came from cabin 7 mine. Cabin thin as a whisper carried along a hallway I couldn't see. The voice had the dry grain of paper and the wet edge of rain. It said my name without speaking it. I turned back because that's what people do in stories you yell at from your couch. Because the mind is a dog that heals to familiarity, even when the hand on the leash is wrong. I stepped into the cabin, and the door pushed itself closed behind me with a breath like someone climbing onto a mattress. The tapping started again. Quicker now, impatient. 3. 1. 3. 1. I pulled the small dining table away from the wall. Have sure ID find a loose panel I could rip off and expose whatever this was, a nest of bad wiring. An animal. Some prank left by summer kids. Instead I found a seam in the wood ID mist. A square cut out the size of a hatch, bolted at the corners and painted over a dozen times. The heads of the bolts were old and rounded, worn nearly smooth. Around the hatch, initials had been carved and sanded out, and carved again. Children's letters. Dates. The word 7 scratched over and over until it became texture. There were no tools in the cabin. I used a butter knife. It rode up and skated off, but with each try the paint cracked and flaked, and a ribbon of cold air slipped through the seam and kissed my knuckles. Lightning flared and, for a second, the entire room appeared without shadows. The ledger on the table lay open to a page I hadn't turned to. September 22nd. Cal office noise complaint at 7. Told him it's the wind September 23rd. Cal office. He left without checking out. Left light on September 23rd, Cal office ledger missing from desk, the butter knife bent. The hatch gave half an inch, and then stuck. Snapping. I pried up a sliver of wood with a knife tip, made a crude pull, and lifted. Below the hatch, a dark space the size of a child, full of dust that smelled like old pennies and wet rope. My breath plumed into it and came back, grown colder, thinner. A strand of hair clung to one joist. The floorboards under my feet hummed, not from the heater, but from something alive, the way a body hums when you press your ear to a chest. I lowered the flashlight into the space and felt stupid and brave, in exactly the right amount of both. The beam slid along the crawl, then bent left where the cabin met the foundation. The light found a scrap of cloth, a lost spoon, a button, a torn corner of a Polaroid photograph with a field in it. or the edge of a shirt. I should have closed the hatch. I didn't. I called Cal. Softly, the way you say a friend. His name in a crowded bar when you see him across the room, but think maybe it dies into him at all. Something moved in the crawl space, and the dust breathed. The first instinct was to slam the hatch. The second was to see. The second one by a hair. I lay flat on the floor, shouldered my arm into the dark, and pushed the flashlight farther in. The beam found a second Hacha twin panel a few feet deeper, where the crawl under 7 met the crawl under the next cabin. The panel was half open, as if someone had lifted it and then changed their mind. I heard the whisper again. Closer. I scrambled back, elbow knocking the ledger to the floor. It fell open to an older page, brown with finger oils. The names were different handwritten in a looping, lighter hand. Some of the entries had little notes. Great fishing. Watch the stove. Kids loved the loft. Then a line that made the skin between my shoulder blades shrink. August 11th. He's back in the walls. I closed the hatch because there are limits. I set the table on top of it because that's what you do when you pretend you're not. Improvising your own safety, I stuffed the ledger under my jacket because some part of me decided proof mattered. The baseboard heater clicked and died as if it were a small animal that had decided to stop trying. The room cooled 2 degrees because fear makes that happen, even when thermostats don't. The only light left was the lantern over the sink, its bulb warm and silly. The cabin door handle turned a 1/4 inch and settled back. I didn't breathe for a count of 10 Mississippi. The handle turned again, slower, in a circle so patient it felt like kindness. Then it stopped, and something scratched at the wood right below the latch the way a child picks at a scab. I backed up the stairs to the loft without deciding to. Each step was a tiny drum. Halfway up, I looked at the bed. The blanket was folded back an inch, as if someone had been about to climb in. A small oval darker than the surrounding pine stained the headboard oil from a forehead pressed there many times. I knelt, hard in my throat, and touched it. It was tacky. There is a moment in storms when the rain stops feeling like weather and begins to feel like a sound someone is making on purpose. This was that moment. The roof was 1,000 hands. The lake was a mouth. I slid under the blanket, because the animal brain knows being under something is safer than being on top of it. I pulled it over my head and watched the fabric close to my face pulse with each breath. The bed dipped a fraction as if someone had put their weight on the bottom step and was deciding whether to climb the last 2. Below, the table legs squealed across the floorboards an inch. I shut my eyes and saw only the shapes light leaves on the inside of lids. The ledger pressed cold against my stomach through the jacket. An idiot shield. A low knock sounded from inside the wall behind the bed, the same rhythm as before. 3, 1, then, softly, in a voice that was just mine pitched through the throat of memory. Let me in. I snapped the blanket down and almost laughed at the emptiness because terror makes humor out of the most nothing things. No one in the loft. No shadow in the corner. Just the little window, oval with raindrops, and the black tree beyond it, too close to the glass. Branches that hadn't been close enough earlier. I shuffled on my knees to the window and pressed my palm to it. The tree wasn't a tree. It was a utility pole. The lines above it swayed, one snapped and dangling, arcing blue where it touched the large roof far away. That was an explanation for the phone. It wasn't an explanation for the whisper that now came not from the hatch, not from the door, not from behind the bed, but from above the ceiling, from the tiny space where insulation, Isha's, and my sty. Let me in, it said again, not like a plea, but like a test. Something brushed my ankle through the slat of the loft. Not a hand, not a tail, the kind of touch that asks, just enough to let you know your brain will fill in the rest. I kicked out and hit nothing. The ledger tumbled and slid down the stairs, pages fanning, coming to rest on the landing. The cabin door handle turned a full half rotation, and held the latch stuck because of the paint, because of the weather, because of luck. A breath fogged the glass of the square window and the door from the outside. I didn't see a face. That would have been a mercy. I saw a hand in a rain punch a sleeve, It lifted and pressed palm flat to the glass, the way relatives do at airports when someone is leaving and everyone knows the next time will be different. The hand stayed there until the condensation bloomed around it and then fell in a tear. I crawled back down 3 steps on all fours and grabbed the ledger. A Polaroid slipped out from between the pages. It was in the corner I'd seen. Under the hatch, this one was intact. A photo of the dock in summer. 2 kids and a man in a yellow slicker. The man's face was turned, but his beard was the wet bark color I'd seen on Cal. The back of the photo had a date inked in neat blue. August 11th. Below it, a word that might have been rules or runes, or maybe just runs. My head supplied the one I least wanted. Something thumped onto the porch. Heavy. A second thump. Each step closer to the door felt deliberate, measured against your fear the way a butcher measures cuts by weight. The handle turned. The latch gave. I did the stupidest and only smart thing left. I opened the upstairs window and let the rain in. Cold. Knifed my face. The lake air smelled like iron. The utility line snapped hard and sparked, and for a second the whole world stuttered between frames. Black light. In the first flash, I saw the porch. Empty except for water, except for the smear of a handprint on the door window. In the second, the door stood open an inch. Then in the third, the shape passed through the gap, rain pooling on the floorboards. The shape didn't look up. It walked under my loft and stopped at the table, and with both hands it pulled the table aside with the sound of furniture and old paint disagreeing. The hatch lifted. I didn't see a face. I saw a hood bent over the opening as if someone were listening to something that lived in the crawl. The figure didn't speak. It reached an arm into the dark, groped until it found the second hatch. And then something in the way it extended the way a person who has done a motion 1,000 times does it without looking told. My body the truth before my head got there. Whoever that was had done this before. Many nights, in many storms. The wind shoved rain into the loft in a wet slap. The figure below paused, and then, without hurry, tilted its head. The hood turned toward the stairs, and then up. It didn't lift or drop. It didn't jerk or lunge. It simply calibrated, measured, found. I slid my leg through the window frame and made a promise to my father that I couldn't. Tiki-pa about being careful and then slid the other leg after it. The porch roof sloped away like a bad idea you can't stop. My shoes lost purchase instantly. I slid, scraped my palms, grabbed the gutter, missed, and dropped into the night. The mud ate my landing with a sound like breath sucked through teeth. I rolled and hit a stump that had been cut 10 years ago and now was a wet bone. My hips aimed. The lake was a wall to my left, the forest a mouth to my right. I chose the mouth because at least it had trees I could put my back against. I ran. Behind me, something hit the porch rail hard and then the ground. I didn't look. I didn't call for Cal because some logic older than my own told me the name is a key and keys open. Things you didn't intend to open. The lodge lights bloomed. Once, twice, died. In the blackout, the world turned to sound. Rain on fir needles. The lurp of someone behind me who wasn't running so much as arriving at me with the certainty of gravity. The grind of gravel underfoot when I hit the main path. I reached the office, slammed my shoulder into the door, and found it latched from the inside with the rubber wedge I'd seen earlier. I kicked it once, and felt would shift Saled. Old, stubborn. The bell's rope brushed my cheek and left a smear of rusty water. The shape behind me stopped 6 feet away. I felt it rather than heard it, the way you feel someone step into an elevator with you. I turned, because you do, because there's dignity in looking at the thing that owns your fear. The hood was down now. Rain ran over the edges of a face, not because the face was wet, but because it did not care that it was wet. The eyes were wrong in a way I can't name except to say they were busy. Cataloging, like a librarian's fingers when a book slide falls. Let me in, it said. The voice didn't belong to the face. It was my voice. It was the voice from the wall. It was the soft sound memories make when you open a box in a garage and smell an old shirt. I did the second stupid and second only smart thing left. I stepped off the porch. Not away, but past the figure, and I ran for the dock. The lake took me to the shins, and then to the waist, and then to the chest. And I kept going until cold hit my heart like a fist, and the dock floated beside me, and I pulled myself onto it with hands that had decided to split. Out on the water, the rain softened by a hair. The wind flattened a path, and then erased it. I lay with my cheek against wet boards, and looked back at the shore. The shape stood at the waterline where sand gives way to something older. It didn't follow. It didn't need to. The hatch of my cabin was open, and the wall behind my bed had learned my name. The ledger under my jacket stuck to my ribs in gelatinous sheets. I peeled it free with a noise people make when something is finally too much. On the last page, in a hand I recognized only because I had watched it so many times. Write notes on grocery lists and hospital forms this past year. There was a single entry, note trays, under Sabani. Left light on lightning lit the dock, and the lake, and the cabins, and the shape at the shore. In the white, the shape lifted its arm and made a motion like a wave. Not a greeting. Assignat. In the black that followed, I heard the floor under cabin 7 move as if 2 people had settled into it at once. The wind shifted. The utility line hissed back to life and then snapped with a sound like someone biting into an apple. Somewhere in the lodge, the generator stuttered and caught. The light over the office blinked on. It shone on the door. It shone on the bell. It shone on the open ledger in my hands. On a page now wet with lake water and rain. The ink bled into a shape that might have been my name or might have been nothing. On the shore, the figure turned from the lake and walked not toward the lodge, not back to the cabins, but along the path toward the maintenance shed where the canoes were stacked for winter. It didn't hurry. It didn't hide. It didn't have to. It knew I would come back when I got cold enough. It knew I would need light and walls and a roof that turns rain into music. The dock rocked under another body's step. I didn't look to see if it was mine.